We're coming to you live. Not really live. You're going to see a recording, but this is live now. So, I am taking the Mustang to LS Fest, and I don't have a truck anymore. We sold all of ours, and I don't have a trailer. The only trailers I've ever had are, you've probably seen the small trailers for the Kia. Not enough for a car, and then the Kia is probably not the best candidate, even though I'd love to try towing with the Kia. So I hit up some of my friends and I was like, hey guys, I don't mean to be a pain in the ass at all, but anyone want to give me a truck and a trailer so I can blitz down there? And yeah, my buddy Mitch was like, yeah, take my truck, I'm going on vacation then anyway. And then my buddy Joey and Ackerman with the Whack Shack Mustang, this is their old race car trailer. He bought a nice enclosed one. So they gave me the trailer, so you can see the Mr. Mustang back there. And it's about 11 and a half hours on paper. That's what the Waze is telling me. So we'll see how long that is. Obviously, I'm probably going to have to stop for gas twice. I'm averaging like 14 miles per gallon. It says I'm going to get high 300s per fill up, but I don't want to go till I'm almost empty. So figure out all that in your head. So yeah, 2 gas stops, should get there. No problem in the morning, and see everybody there, and we'll post this stuff up with the rest of my video. Please forgive my vertical video, but I don't want to hold it crooked like with my charging cable while I'm driving with a trailer. I hope you all can understand. Anyway, we'll see you there. Bye. Alright, so made it to Bowling Green in like 13-ish hours. I left at like 5 p.m., drove straight through the night. After some fuel stops and whatever, I got there. I think there's an hour time difference. I got there at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m., one of them. Depends on whether it's Eastern or Central time. I can't remember. Anyway, I got there really early, got unloaded, got my pass and stuff, and pitted with my buddy Frank over in the staging lanes here. That's what I'm parked under, is his like a stacker lift, balling out of control, awesome trailer. And I told everybody that he was my driver and that he transported the car for me. Well, not really. I only told some people that, and they laughed, and maybe some of them took me seriously. Anyway, we'll get back on track. The idea here was for Cameron to meet up with me as soon as he could leave work early, and we were going to try to race the Mustang the first day and then race his Crown Vic the second day. So we bought our time and waited for our test and tune event, and we had a little bit of issues with my parachute mount we had to fix. It took too long, too hard to explain. Maybe I'll go into it another time. And we did get the car down into tech, and I got a number, and we also threw it on their scale, and it was 2910 in race trim with no driver, so that's pretty good. 2910. Cameron in it. It'll make a difference too. 3060, 3055 with Cameron in it. So around nighttime, the track was ready, test and tune was open, the car was ready, everyone was teched in, and I promised my wife that I wouldn't drive 13 hours away and lid this thing and die a fiery death and not make it home, which she was genuinely worried about, and never asks me not to do anything, obviously. Look how I live. So I'm like, well, you know, Cameron, if you want to race this thing, you can make a pass. So he jumped in, and he was definitely nervous, uncharacteristically nervous, and had a little bit of issues at the starting line. We'll show that in the video and stuff. I'm not going to go at length, but he had a rough time. His nerves were at their limit, and when he launched, it was actually a good launch. We set up the car to have a pretty heavy ignition retard. Some people were spinning, some people weren't. We didn't want to spend all day messing around with this thing, and so my buddy Frank was like, hey, let's make 10 passes, and I'll set up your suspension on low boost, and then and I'm like, man, we're just not going to have that much time. So we put in the kill tune on approximately 26 pounds, which I estimate was at least 850 rear wheel, and so we put the 7 degrees of ignition retard on the hit on a 10-pound launch. Cameron didn't make it to the total 10. I think he left on about 6. We'll go over the log.
and he left a little bit early, and the ignition retard, and it dead hooked like it probably would have hooked in water. It was incredible. It dead hooked a 154, and then he rode it out into the limiter and realized it wasn't a 4L80E car, and realized the car was okay and he didn't break anything. So he clicked second and rolled into it again, and immediately when it came up on 26 pounds of boost, it let go, which wasn't too big of a deal because I put an engine diaper and a scatter shield on the transmission before we left. It was one of the things I was scrambling to do in case something did happen. Obviously, this thing's been through the ringer and it's old, and if it can happen, it will happen in front of people at a giant event, of course. So, well, let's roll that beautiful bean footage. Now here, you also might have noticed, I thought he just cracked boost cut and my boost controller settings were wrong, or something else like that happened in my tune-up, and I actually stopped rolling and I missed the smoke show, which, I mean, you really can't see much. It just poofs the rods into the diaper, and there's quite a bit of smoke, and you can't really even see anything else happening. So, I'll quick cut to the in-car here where they're lining them up. And Mark and I put this seat so far back and so low, and to no fault of his own, Cameron is not our size, so it was a little bit of a struggle also. So don't be too mean to the man. So here we go. I even guessed on my bump settings for this car, and they worked out. Cameron did a great job of slowing down with the cab filled with smoke and the complete windshield covered in oil like wax paper at night. Didn't hit the wall or anything else, so awesome. Good. I'm glad he's okay, obviously. So he just jumps out and they make sure nothing's on fire, and when they're all wondering what we want to do, we show up with the golf cart in the meantime, and you guys can check out my reaction.
You gonna pull me? Cool.
I didn't really care at all, obviously. I've done this plenty of times. Cameron was super nervous that I'd be upset. Other people were nervous that I would be upset, or like, oh no, the motor blew. And I'm like, man, I got to be the only person that thought this would blow up, other than all the people on Sloppy that told me it would blow up. So I threw the hook over the rad support, and we busted him out of that joint. Here we are doing our jerk photo shoots. I got these pictures of us rolling off the track with it. I'll post one up here. All right, there we go. And the awesome part of this, and something I've learned that I'll always do probably from now on for questionable stuff like this isn't a street car, and something I drive all the time, and I don't know if it's going to explode or not. So my street cars, at least, you know, they get punished quite a bit, and they don't have any issues, so there's really no reason for me to think it would come apart unless I drastically, aggressively changed the tune-up. So anyway, yeah, I put a diaper on this thing, and there was nearly no mess. You can even hear the cars getting ready, and as soon as we dragged him off, they're doing burnouts, ready to make a pass, and someone went 8-0 right after us. There was the camera moved over. There was a tiny bit of dribble, but the diaper caught all of the oil and all of the parts, and I will show you how much that was in a second.
All right, well, obviously we had a mishap, and I'll explain all that. I don't want to waste my time, and I have like no sleep over the last 4 days, so I'm not even going to try. But look at this. Ooh, it sounds like marbles.
Yeah, pretty much.
I think that's... And then what's back here? Oh! Oh,
Ooh, marbles back there too.
that's this really heavy dipe right here, and this is... Jesus. So I'm not even gonna try a video. We're just gonna make a goddamn mess getting this out. But
Here.
check that out.
You can get it inside.
Oh, yeah.
the shop a little bit.
She's good.
Put your
Oh,
parts
yeah.
out for you.
We can fix that pan. Unless it knocked everything. We'll see. Well, that's fine. That's okay.
That's normal.
That's good.
Oh, that's yeah. Right.
So again, I jumped in the car and blasted 13 some hours home straight through the middle of the night again. I was up for like 48 hours for a couple days in a row. So I got the guy home and we put it up, and that was my buddy Mitch came over and we checked out a few things just for fun. And right around the time on the way home and right after it blew up, I was thinking, you know, is this just the limit of the power, or did I make another mistake somewhere in my haste to get it ready to race? So the thought is, yes, possibly this is too much for Gen 3s. That's something we might answer another day, because I'm going to be throwing in my Gen 4 rods to eliminate failures and downtime from now on, even though honestly it does not take very long to work on this car. People always get really mad about that I'm wasting too much time when they really don't know how much time I'm spending on it. You know, I don't know what that's all about. Anyway, they're upset. I guess they're entitled to be upset. So we'll dive right into it. Mitch and I were like thinking about stuff. I was thinking about stuff on the way home, and down at LS Fest, I was like, you know what? When it nicked that head gasket on the dyno and I redid the head gasket, I said to myself, I better do a compression test and check the piston height to make sure that I didn't bend this rod, because it went through a pretty stressful event. It pushed the head gasket out, and on D-cell, I'm sure it garbled on a bunch of water, and it could have done a little bit of a hydrolock, just enough to bend the rod. The motor was absolutely quiet. Usually when you bend a rod, you'll actually hear some noise. You'll hear the piston hitting the crank and the skirt and some other weird stuff. So I'll digress from all of that. It could have been because, well, you'll see when I take this whole thing apart, it was literally just the cylinder that had the hydrolock slash head gasket event. It was only that cylinder that fell apart. Every other piston and rod spins completely freely. You can turn the balancer. The starter would run. There was nothing interfering after it ejected it all out of the bottom of the pan violently. So pretty interesting. I've never done that. So I started tearing the motor apart, and I got it out on my engine stand and yanked the heads real quick. And I was like, well, I hope I didn't nick my cam up, but maybe my my block and everything is good, and I can just put the rotator from the other motor in, because the other motor is literally like it was dipped in black tar, and it has some concerns with the bearings and some other things. So I was like, well, hopefully I can just swap my rotator over, keep everything else, and it'll be happy. So one of the first things I noticed is I yanked the heads off, and a bunch of the pistons were nicked up from valves, and a bunch of my valves were bent, and I was like, oh. And one of my push rods was bent into a zigzag. I was like, well, I probably snapped the timing chain, and then the bottom end pounded all the valves out, and did all this other damage. So hopefully everything else on this top end isn't severely damaged from all this garbage too. So I dug into that next. We'll show you some pictures of the pistons and everything hitting the valves and everything in the heads. So now I got to do a little bit of mix and match with my heads to get a runner. And there we go. There's the guy that's missing. vanished from existence. And then these are nicked up. I swear I didn't cut those reliefs. That was a full-on contact sport right there on that cylinder. And that has the double nicks like a LY6. So here is the timing chain that snapped. I seriously doubt this chain just snapped, and that's why this was a failure. I would assume that when the piston collapsed into the crankcase and the crank smashed it into 80,000 pieces is probably when the timing chain might have locked up. And a bunch of the other pistons and rods were bent. It's hard to see them. These were the easiest ones to see visually that were bent. So yeah, a lot of the other ones were bent from the event or from whatever else, and it only took me like an hour and 15 minutes working at a pretty slow pace to yank the engine and pull it partially apart. And then my buddy Mitch came over that let me borrow his truck, and we made the best of what we had from both here. So it has the Gen 4 rods in here, and obviously my crank and everything is fairly beat up, but we're gonna see what she can do with the rest of her life and move on from there. And hopefully I will get I'm getting another pan. And what else am I waiting on? We're gonna wash the heads in a parts washer from the other motor, and I'm probably just gonna do valve springs on that 2-cylinder heads instead of reuse these ones with the valves are all bent up and everything else, and all the head gaskets have been blown off of them. So we'll do all of that and toss it back together, see how it runs, and maybe make some loaded hits on the dyno and try to get to a track rental event on the 20th, hopefully, and see if we can revisit this whole event with some better results. Plan B for me is to just blame my tuner. It seems like that's a fairly popular, easy way to get out of trouble. So if anybody knows this guy, that's the one that loaded the tune in my car before we made the pass.